I found out my husband bought his mistress a six-figure diamond ring, so I made him regret it.
I can still feel the cold weight of that ring against my skin. 6 carats of pristine, soulless sparkle, set in platinum, glowing like betrayal under my bedroom lights. It wasn't meant for me. No, that diamond was destined for someone else's finger, someone who wasn't his wife of 15 years. The jeweler's voice had a slick kind of smugness when I called to double-check the transaction I found buried in our joint credit card statement. "Yes, ma'am," he said. "That piece retails in the 6-figure range." 6 figures? My husband, Jason Whitmore, had dropped a small fortune. Not on me, not even on an anniversary gift, but on her. I wish I could say I was snooping. I wish I could tell you I hacked into his email or went through his wallet like some suspicious wife in a Lifetime movie. But no, fate did the dirty work for me. It was a single ping, a notification on our shared iPad, just a thank you email from Cartier. A generic little message congratulating Mr. Jason Whitmore on his exceptional purchase. That's when the ground started to shift. And that was only the beginning.
It was like the universe finally ran out of patience with my denial. Like it had watched me play the fool long enough and decided, tonight's the night she wakes up. I was sitting at the dark oak dining table Jason and I had picked out in our newlywed glow, back when we thought matching furniture meant forever. The velvet ring box sat open beside my untouched dinner, its contents catching the candlelight like it was proud of the damage it was about to confirm. I'd found it, tucked away in the lining of his vintage leather briefcase, the same one I'd saved up to buy him for our 10th anniversary. Romantic, right? Turns out, it made the perfect hiding place for a secret future that didn't include me. My hands were shaking as I texted him. Working late again? I already knew the answer. Yes, love, big client meeting. Don't wait up. I stared at the message until it blurred. How many times had I read those same words? How many client meetings were actually candlelit dinners with her? How many lonely nights had I curled up in bed, thinking I was married to a man chasing success, when he was really chasing another woman's touch? I reached for the Bordeaux he'd been saving for something special. Guess tonight qualified. And yes, this definitely qualified as a special occasion. The wine rolled across my tongue, bold and complicated, laced with the bitter aftertaste of betrayal and the slow rot of 15 wasted years. Every sip was a toast to the woman I used to be, the one who believed her marriage was bulletproof. The house felt cavernous. Every wall, every carefully curated corner echoed with memories that now felt tainted. I found myself wondering, had he brought her here while I was in Denver visiting my sister? Had they sat on my custom furniture, laughing at the clueless wife who thought her biggest concern was whether the throw pillows matched the drapes? My phone buzzed again. Love you. Don't forget, Carrington Foundation Gala next Saturday. Ah, yes, the gala. Boston's upper crust, pretending their tax-deductible donations bought them moral high ground, where Jason and I played our annual roles. He, the financial savant, me, the flawless event architect, the perfect couple, in designer clothing and coordinated smiles. And of course, she'd be there. Maxine Monroe, the newly divorced consultant who somehow landed a gig at Jason's firm just weeks after her split. Maxine, with the dancer's posture and surgically precise charm. Maxine, who always let her hand linger a few seconds too long on Jason's arm when she said hello. Maxine, who'd accidentally shown up at 3 different restaurants where Jason and I had dinner this past month. Coincidence? Please. I reached for the ring. slipped it onto my finger. It was too big. Of course it was. She had longer, thinner fingers than mine, elegant, delicate. I remembered noticing them once, flashing beneath a simple diamond tennis bracelet, as she told a story that made Jason laugh, like he hadn't in months. Not with me, anyway. The diamond splintered the chandelier light across the dining room walls, scattering sharp little prisms, like pieces of a life I no longer recognized. Something inside me splintered too, but unlike the light, I knew I wouldn't be coming back together in quite the same shape. "Can't wait for the gala," I typed back, each word soaked in venom-laced sugar. A plan had already started to take form, clear and razor-sharp, just like the stone now sitting mockingly on my hand. That ring may have been meant for her, but it was my stage now. The week leading up to the Carrington Gala moved in strange, painful focus, like stepping out of a fog and seeing the wreckage for the first time. Once you open your eyes to betrayal, you can't unsee it. The truth is everywhere, unavoidable. The way Jason always placed his phone face down now. The new ritual, rushing straight into the shower the moment he came home. The sudden allergy to the perfume he once begged me to wear. The same scent he said made him want to take me apart, piece by piece. I became a forensic analyst in stilettos, digging through months of deception like a crime scene. And what I found? Credit card charges for candlelit dinners I never attended, hotel bookings in our own city, a luxury weekend in New York, booked during the same weekend my mother was in surgery. Jason had claimed he was drowning in reports, said he couldn't leave the office. I stood in front of the mirror one morning, whispering to my own reflection, like I was trying to wake a stranger. I gave him everything. And it was true. I had left my family behind to follow his career across the country. I played hostess, planner, partner, made our house a home. I put my dreams on pause. I even postponed motherhood because he said the timing wasn't right. I had carved myself into the image of a perfect wife. But clearly, Jason Whitmore was in the market for something else entirely. That Tuesday, I showed up at Jason's office unannounced, holding a bag from his favorite deli, his go-to lunch back when he still had time for things like me. It used to be our tradition, until one day he was too busy for midday visits. That excuse had lasted almost a year. The receptionist looked startled when she saw me. Her smile was tight, her posture stiff. "Is Mr. Whitmore in a meeting?" I asked, all sugar and satin. Yes, with Miss Monroe, but I can let him know you're here, Mrs. Whitmore." "No need," I said smoothly, placing the lunch on the counter. "Just tell him I stopped by." I turned like I was leaving, but then I heard it. That laugh. Maxine's perfectly manicured, breathy laugh, dripping down the hallway like perfume. Before I could stop myself, I followed the sound. My heels barely made a sound on the plush carpet, but my pulse thundered like a drumline. The conference room door was cracked open, just a sliver, just enough. They weren't poring over quarterly reports or discussing client portfolios. They were lounging, shoulders brushing, knees touching. Jason's hand rested casually on her leg. Her fingers twirled his tie like it was a leash she'd gotten comfortable holding. "She has no idea," Maxine said, her voice smooth as velvet. "And honestly, Jason, why would she? She's so content in her little world of charity luncheons and book clubs. My husband, the same man who once cried during our wedding vows, laughed. She doesn't ask questions, he said. It's easier that way." Then Maxine leaned in, so close, her lips nearly brushed his ear. "After the gala," she whispered, After the gala, we'll figure it out. The ring? That was just the beginning. I backed away, every nerve in my body electrified with devastation. My heart was pounding so loudly, I half expected them to hear it. I made it back to the car, on autopilot. But once the door shut behind me, the dam broke. Not quiet, dignified tears. Those had left me weeks ago. This was raw, violent heartbreak, full-body sobs that stole my breath and left my ribs sore from the force of it. I cried like I was mourning a death, because I was. That night, Jason came home even later than usual. I'd gone all out, cooked his favorite dinner, lit candles, even slipped into that navy silk dress he once claimed made his brain short-circuit. He barely glanced at me. "Long day?" I asked, keeping my voice calm, even as his voice echoed in my head. She doesn't ask questions. It's easier that way. "Yeah, brutal. Just drained," he muttered, already reaching for the scotch. No kiss, no compliment, no questions about my day. We sat down to eat, but he wasn't really there. Every few minutes, he'd glance under the table, tapping at his phone like a teenager hiding messages. He thought I didn't notice. He thought I never noticed. I did. I watched him carefully, his tells, his avoidance. He wouldn't meet my eyes when I mentioned running into an old friend who just happened to work in his building. "Oh, by the way," I said sweetly, pouring him more wine, "I've been thinking about the Carrington Gala." That got his attention. "What about it?" "I think I'd like to be more involved this year," I said lightly. "They're always looking for high-end auction items, and I still have a few connections from my event planning days." His shoulders relaxed. He even smiled, just a little. To him, this meant I was staying in my safe little sandbox. Charities, centerpieces, cocktail hours. No threat to his double life. "That's great, Claire, really. Whatever makes you happy." Whatever makes you happy. As if my happiness was some side project, a hobby. He had no idea what I was planning. To him, my happiness was like a houseplant, something you water once in a while, so it doesn't completely die. Never mind that he'd spent the last year gutting every part of what actually made me feel alive. That night, after Jason drifted off to sleep, his body angled safely away from mine, as if the 6 inches of space between us had become permanent, I slipped out of bed without a sound. I padded to the closet and knelt behind the row of rarely used winter sweaters. Hidden there was something he didn't know existed, a fireproof lockbox, my little vault of truth. Inside were my grandmother's heirloom pearls, our marriage license, and now the diamond ring meant for another woman. I placed it inside, beside a growing pile. Printed credit card statements for hotel stays and dinners I never attended, screenshots of flirty, cryptic texts I'd memorized before he could delete them, a thumb drive with recordings of his late-night calls, captured when my suspicions started to harden into certainty. "I gave everything to them," I whispered, carefully locking it shut, and they tossed me aside like I was disposable. But I wasn't disposable, and soon they'd learn exactly how wrong they were. 3 days before the gala, I picked up my phone and dialed a number I'd been holding in reserve, Evelyn Carrington. We weren't exactly brunch buddies, but we'd served on enough nonprofit boards together to establish mutual respect. She was powerful, elegant, and knew how to recognize strength in another woman, even when it came dressed in pain. "Claire Whitmore, what a lovely surprise," her polished voice answered. "I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time," I said smoothly. I wanted to talk about a rather unique contribution to the auction this year.
Not at all, dear, Evelyn replied, with her signature grace. We're always grateful for last-minute contributions, especially from someone with your taste. I inhaled slowly, steadying my voice like an actress before curtain call. I have a piece of jewelry, a diamond ring, Cartier. It's quite valuable, and it comes with a story. There was a pause, then a curious lilt in her voice. Interesting. You know how our guests adore provenance. Exactly, I said, letting each word land with purpose. I thought it might serve as the centerpiece item for the auction, and perhaps I could present it personally, share its story, give the crowd something to remember. Evelyn hesitated, but I could feel her leaning in. That's not our usual format, but Claire, you've always had a talent for creating unforgettable moments, and frankly, this year's lineup could use some electricity. Tell me more. For the next 20 minutes, I walked her through my carefully curated version of the plan. Polished, precise, edited for maximum impact, but with just enough real emotion to feel raw, authentic. By the time I finished, Evelyn sounded downright thrilled. This is exactly the kind of drama our buttoned-up little gala needs. I'll have the program updated immediately. And don't worry, I'll make sure both Jason and Miss Monroe receive personal invitations. I wouldn't want them to miss the show. I smiled into the phone. Thank you, Evelyn. This means more to me than you know. The second I hung up, I dialed someone I hadn't spoken to in nearly a year. Vanessa Lynn, my old college roommate turned Boston's fiercest divorce attorney. Jason had always said Vanessa was too intense, that her energy was draining, and I should surround myself with more positive people. Vanessa saw right through him, and he knew it. She picked up after 2 rings. Claire, wow, it's been forever. Is everything all right? You sound different. I looked out the window, the city glowing beneath me like a map of possibilities. I'm about to be, I said. Can I see you today? I asked Vanessa. And can you bring your financial forensics expert? 2 hours later, I was seated in her sleek downtown office, spreading out the kind of paperwork that could burn a life to the ground. Bank statements with irregular withdrawals, property records tied to a waterfront condo, purchased through a shell LLC I'd painstakingly traced back to Jason. Text messages I'd quietly pulled from our shared cloud account before he realized I knew. Vanessa let out a low whistle as she flipped through the pages. Jesus, Claire, how long have you known? Known? Recently. Suspected? I looked away. Longer than I want to admit. I slid the Cartier ring box across the polished desk. This was the final confirmation. She opened it, her eyes narrowing at the sparkle. Well, that's one hell of a smoking gun. I want everything ready to file. Divorce petition, asset protection, the works. It all goes through the moment the gala ends. She leaned back, watching me closely. That doesn't sound like the Claire I remember, the one who used to avoid confrontation like it was contagious. I met her gaze, steady and unflinching. That Claire let herself be minimized, silenced, erased. I buried her. Now I'm handling this my way. By Friday, the chessboard was set. The papers were drawn and waiting for my signature. I had a financial escape route. The emergency accounts Jason once laughed off as my doomsday fund were now fully loaded. Ironically, his infidelity had made my quiet caution a lifeline. Everything was in place. All that remained was the final scene. My sister, always the steady one, had prepped her guest room for my temporary transition, a phrase we both knew was just polite cover for escape plan. But more importantly, I'd finalized my secret arrangement with Evelyn Carrington.
I would be the surprise presenter for the night's grand finale, an auction no one would ever forget. The morning of the gala, Jason was jittery, checking his Rolex like it was counting down to Judgment Day. "Need to swing by the office," he announced over breakfast, not meeting my eyes. "Last-minute client fire to put out." "On a Saturday?" I asked, lifting one eyebrow. He faltered, just for half a second. "Markets don't care what day it is, Mia. You know that." I offered a calm, practiced smile. "Of course. Just make sure you're back in time to help me with the auction setup." He gave a non-committal shrug. "Might be cutting it close. Why don't you go ahead without me?" Exactly, as I'd predicted. The moment he left, I packed a sleek overnight bag and stashed it in my trunk. Insurance, freedom in leather trim. Then I turned to my wardrobe. Not the navy sheath dress Jason always praised. Its slimming, babe, hides the hips. No. Tonight called for something he would never approve of. I chose the crimson silk gown I'd bought in secret months ago, one that celebrated every inch of the woman he had spent years subtly asking to shrink. I curled my hair differently, lined my eyes with more edge than usual, and finally fastened the vintage diamond earrings my grandmother left me. The ones Jason once called dated and suggested I sell. As I stood in front of the mirror, I barely recognized the woman staring back. And that was the point. It wasn't that I looked like a different woman. It was that, for the first time, I saw her clearly. The strength, the presence, the quiet fire that had been dimmed by years of subtle dismissals and decisions made for me. I had let myself be eclipsed by a man who convinced me that shrinking was love. "Never again," I whispered to my reflection, sliding the diamond ring onto my right hand, just for a moment. One last time. Then I placed it in its velvet box and slipped it into my evening clutch. Jason had spent the last 15 years making the decisions, steering our life like I was a passenger. Tonight, I would make the decision, and by the time he realized it, the game would be over. The Carrington estate shimmered beneath a canopy of string lights. Its cream-colored tent stretched across the manicured lawn like a wedding veil for the city's sins. A string quartet played near the grand entrance as Boston's elite arrived, in black sedans and couture gowns. I entered alone. I'd texted Jason earlier. "I'll meet you inside." Evelyn found me within seconds, gliding across the tent in a gown of deep midnight silk. "Mia, you look absolutely radiant." Her eyes flicked over me with a mix of surprise and admiration. This wasn't the woman she usually saw chairing fundraising luncheons. This was someone different, someone deliberate. "Everything said as requested," she said, her voice low but energized. "The ring will be the closing auction item. We've set up the private mic and projection screens just as you outlined." "And the videographer?" I asked. "In position, discreet but ready." "Are you sure about this? It's rather unconventional." I gave her a calm, steady smile. "Sometimes convention is exactly what needs to be broken." I moved through the crowd like I belonged, no longer hiding in Jason's shadow, no longer playing the dutiful wife in quiet tones and safe dresses. I accepted compliments with gracious nods, knowing the real show hadn't even started yet. And when it did, they'd never forget it. A few guests asked where Jason was, and I simply smiled and said, "He'll be joining shortly. Let them wonder." Across the room, I caught sight of Maxine Monroe, draped in a silver backless gown that shimmered with just the right amount of effort. Her hair was swept up in one of those painstaking styles, meant to look effortless. She looked every inch the calculated seductress. Our eyes met for the briefest second. She gave me that smile, the kind women save for each other when they know the battlefield has already been drawn. Polite, hollow, predatory. I gave her the exact same smile back, except mine carried a truth she couldn't possibly see coming. Jason arrived nearly 40 minutes late. His tuxedo was sharp, but his bow tie was slightly askew, a detail he would have never missed. From across the room, I watched him scan the crowd. His gaze paused, just briefly, on Maxine, before continuing, searching. And then he saw me.
For a moment, there was a flicker of confusion in his expression. A subtle jolt, like his brain had to recalibrate. This version of me, the one in red, in command, radiant, was not the one he'd dressed down for 15 years. He made his way toward me, masking the hesitation with a kiss on the cheek. "Mia," he said slowly, "you look different." "Thank you," I replied coolly, offering no hint of whether I took it as praise or warning. "I thought you'd be knee-deep in auction prep." I smiled, effortless, assured. "Everything's already in place. I'm presenting something special tonight." He blinked, just once, and for the first time in years, I saw it, uncertainty, in his eyes. Before Jason could respond, Evelyn tapped her crystal flute. That familiar chime, delicate but commanding, rolled through the room, signaling the start of dinner. Jason and I were seated at separate tables, a detail I had personally arranged with Evelyn. Better networking for the cause, I'd said. He hadn't questioned it. Over the next hour, I watched him and Maxine exchange glances across the tent. Subtle, charged. Once, he disappeared from his table for precisely 12 minutes. Yes, I counted. And not long after, Maxine excused herself, conveniently absent for nearly the same duration. Predictable. Pathetic, really. At 9 sharp, the auction kicked off. The crowd, loosened by vintage champagne and performative generosity, buzzed with energy as rare wines, luxury getaways, and gallery-grade artwork were paraded across the stage. With each item sold, the excitement swelled, like a drum roll, stretching toward a climax that only I could feel coming. Then Evelyn took the microphone again, her voice calm, clear, and unmistakably regal. "Ladies and gentlemen, our final offering this evening is quite special. A personal contribution from one of our most admired supporters. Please welcome Mia Whitmore." A hush swept through the tent. Then, a spotlight sliced through the ambient glow, landing squarely on me. I rose from my seat. One step, then another. Measured, deliberate, like the final movement in a symphony. Across the room, Jason sat up straighter, his brow tightening in confusion. We hadn't discussed anything about me presenting, and that was the point. "Good evening," I began, my voice stronger than I'd expected, steady, unshaken. "Tonight, I have the unique honor of presenting an item unlike any other in this auction, not just because of its monetary worth, but because of the story it carries." A server approached, carrying a sleek black Cartier box atop a velvet cushion. I opened it, slow, deliberate grace, revealing the brilliant diamond inside. "This is a Cartier engagement ring," I said, holding it aloft so the 6-carat stone caught the stage lights and sent fractured brilliance across the room. Flawless diamond, platinum setting, valued comfortably in the 6-figure range. I paused, letting the silence stretch. Eyes were already widening, forks being set down. "But its real value," I continued, "lies in what it represents.
My gaze glided across the room like a searchlight, and then it landed on him, Jason, rigid in his seat, face ashen. Maxine, 2 tables away, was frowning now, subtly leaning forward, trying to get a better look at the ring. This piece was purchased exactly 1 month ago, I said, voice unwavering. Not for a wife, but for a mistress. Boom! The words landed like a grenade. A collective gasp broke out, hushed but sharp. Heads turned, hands covered mouths. A low hum of shock swept through the tent like a sudden breeze. From the back of the room, the videographer I had hired, quiet, discreet, captured every glorious frame, especially Jason's face, as the panic bloomed beneath the surface of his tailored composure. You might be wondering how such an intimate gift ended up here tonight, I said, stepping to the side of the stage with perfect poise. The answer is simple. I met the camera directly, voice ice sharp. I found it. On cue, the large LED screens on either side of the tent flickered to life. First, a crystal clear image of our joint credit card statement. Jason Whitmore's name, in bold type, right next to the Cartier charge. Then, a grainy but unmistakable photo, Jason and Maxine entering a boutique hotel, his hand resting casually on the small of her back. A wave of stunned murmurs swept the room, like hundreds of lungs exhaling disbelief all at once. For those who may be new to the cast of characters in this little drama, I said, lightly, with the air of a university lecturer delivering a masterclass in betrayal, the husband is mine, Jason Whitmore. I turned, paused, held the moment. And the mistress? I let the air thicken. Well, I said slowly, she's right here with us tonight. The spotlight swung across the tent, landed squarely on Maxine. She had just started to rise, caught in motion like a deer under high beams. Her expression frozen, her skin drained to ash. Gasps rippled again as a new image lit up the screens, a screenshot of a text conversation. Once C is out of the picture, the words hung in the air like poison. I let the silence settle before speaking. My tone, calm, clinical, like I was narrating a cautionary tale for the next woman. Imagine my surprise, I said, pacing the stage with quiet authority, when I learned the man who swore we couldn't afford to renovate our outdated kitchen somehow found the funds for this little showstopper. Another image appeared. A deed, luxury waterfront condo, signed, sealed, purchased under a shell company 3 months ago. And imagine my further surprise, I added, when I traced that shell company right back to him. A love nest, I mused. That's the term, isn't it? And then Jason shot to his feet, storming toward the stage, his face twisted in panic, trying, desperately, to reclaim the narrative. "Mia, this is ridiculous!" His voice cracked under the weight of public scrutiny. "You're humiliating yourself." 2 security guards, stationed precisely for this moment, stepped into his path. Calm, firm, immovable. I turned to him, smiling, not sweetly, but with something far more powerful. "No, Jason, for the first time in years, I'm not humiliating myself. I'm telling the truth." I faced the crowd again, now utterly silent, waiting, hanging on every word. "The proceeds from this ring," I said, lifting it one final time into the light, "will go to the Haven House on Hamilton Street. A shelter for women rebuilding their lives after escaping toxic, controlling relationships." A heartbeat of silence passed. "To get things started, I'll place the first bid myself, $20,000. And then the room exploded. Not in chaos, but in something even more powerful: solidarity. Women's voices rang out from every corner, calling bids, raising hands, eyes blazing with something raw and righteous. Men joined in too, some perhaps out of shame, others out of conscience. The numbers soared. At the far end of the tent, Maxine tried to slip out, her silver gown catching the light like a flare. But Evelyn, brilliant and composed, had anticipated this moment. Additional security stood at each exit. No one was leaving. Not yet. And then, just as the bidding crossed into 6 figures, another voice joined in, clear, confident. 100,000. It was Vanessa Lynn, standing tall at the back. She had arrived just in time, and she hadn't missed a thing.
Just as I moved to bring the auction to a close, a voice cut through the sea of murmurs, loud, sharp, ragged with desperation. 200,000. The room frozen. Jason. He stepped forward, face flushed with some volatile mix of rage and panic, hands clenched at his sides. 200,000, he repeated, more strained this time, and a public apology to my wife. I turned to him, expression cool, unreadable. The bid is acknowledged, I said evenly. An apology is not required. His voice cracked as he pushed forward. Mia, please, don't do this. Let's talk, just you and me. We can fix this. We can... I shook my head, slowly. We're well past private conversations, Jason. You made your decisions. Now I'm making mine. From across the room, Vanessa rose, voice calm, lethal. 250,000. Jason's head whipped around. Stay out of this, Vanessa. This is between me and my wife. I raised a hand, gently. Actually, as of 9 o'clock this morning, when my attorney filed the divorce papers, I paused. I'm no longer your wife. I'm just the woman you cheated on. A stunned silence fell, again. And this ring? I lifted it one final time into the spotlight. It's evidence in the divorce. Evidence I could have used to bleed you dry. But instead, I'm donating it to help women rebuild their lives, just like I'm rebuilding mine. The tent exploded with applause, gasps, cheers, even a few tears. I barely heard it. Jason stood there, frozen, his mind scrambling to catch up, realizing just how completely he'd lost control of the narrative. Going once, I called out, voice steady. Going twice, 300,000. The voice was deep, steady, familiar. I turned, my heart hitching for the first time that evening. Steve Wheeler, my first love, the boy who once held my heart in a campus coffee shop. The man Jason had always resented because he saw what we had, even before I did. Steve had recently returned to Boston after years overseas. We'd reconnected, carefully, when he reached out 3 months ago after he spotted Jason and Maxine together at a restaurant in Manhattan. He didn't need to say anything more. I smiled as I brought down the gavel. Sold. Sold, I said firmly, lowering my hand, like an imaginary gavel, to the gentleman who understands the true value of loyalty. It's been 6 months since that night, what Boston's elite now refer to, in hushed, scandal-tinged whispers, as the diamond auction. 6 months of rebuilding, of rediscovering pieces of myself I had long buried beneath compromise and silence, of reclaiming power I never should have surrendered in the first place. The divorce wrapped up faster than I expected. Jason, crumbling under the weight of viral shame and public fallout,
signed a settlement that could have been mistaken for a payout to royalty. Once the video of my speech made the rounds, shared, dissected, celebrated, his world began to unravel. His firm placed him on indefinite leave after multiple women came forward with complaints of misconduct. The carefully curated empire he had built, brick by smug brick, cracked, wide, open. And Maxine? She vanished from Boston's social radar entirely. Word has it, she moved to Seattle, where she's spinning her own version of the story, one where she's the tragic victim of a jealous, vengeful wife. Let her say whatever she needs to feel better. Whatever lies help her sleep at night. As for me, I sold the house. Too many memories, too many sleepless nights, and silences that screamed louder than any argument. I walked away from the house where I lost myself and bought a brownstone in Back Bay. It's smaller, but it's mine. Every room reflects who I am now, not the version of me that Jason tried to mold. The walls are lined with art he would have called too bold, textiles he'd labeled too much, and I adore every inch of it. Evelyn and I have become more than allies. We're friends, real ones. She asked me to join the board of her foundation, and now I lead a new initiative that helps women rebuild their financial independence after divorce or widowhood. Ironically, the seed money came from the infamous ring. After winning the auction, Steve Wheeler, yes, that's Steve, donated it right back to the foundation. Quietly, no speeches, just impact. Steve and I meet now and then. Coffee, walks, the occasional dinner that lingers just a little longer than it used to. There's peace in his presence, a respect I hadn't realized I was starved for after years of emotional erosion. He never pushes, never presumes. He simply shows up and stays. Whether it becomes something more, maybe, maybe not. For now, I'm enjoying the rare freedom of making decisions for no one but myself. This morning, an envelope arrived. Jason's handwriting on the front. Inside, a letter full of remorse, vague promises of growth, an implied invitation to revisit the ashes. I folded it carefully, slipped it back into the envelope, and put it in a drawer I don't plan to open again. Some doors stay closed for a reason. 6 months ago, a letter like that might have shaken me, might have had me pacing the floor, questioning everything, wondering if I'd gone too far. But not anymore. I read it once, then fed it through the shredder in my new home office. No hesitation, no second thoughts. Sometimes people, usually the kind who've never had their lives split in two, ask me if I regret how public my response was, if I could have handled it more privately, more gracefully. I just smile. When someone tries to erase you, I tell them, there's nothing more powerful than becoming impossible to ignore. That diamond ring, the one meant to rewrite my story without me, now sits in a glass case at the women's shelter. It's mounted beneath a brass plaque that reads, "Your worth is not defined by those who failed to recognize it." Every time I visit, I watch women pause in front of it, watch their faces shift as they read those words. Some cry, some smile. All of them feel it. Last week, I attended another gala, alone, intentionally. I wore emerald green. I laughed loudly when something was actually funny. I bid too high on a painting that made me feel something. When a well-meaning acquaintance blinked at me and said, "Wow, you're already out and about?" I smiled again. "I'm not out and about," I said. "I'm exactly where I belong." Because the woman who once found that ring tucked in a briefcase, doubting everything she thought she knew, she's gone. In her place stands someone sharper, braver, someone who finally understands the most valuable thing she ever recovered was herself. It wasn't just about freedom, or dignity, or even justice. It was the moment I realized I had never needed a man's validation to be extraordinary. The greatest revenge isn't spectacle. It isn't public humiliation or financial leverage. It's something quieter, something far more enduring. It's knowing the unshakable truth that you reclaimed your story, that every chapter from here on out is written by your hand, that you took something designed to break you and used it as the cornerstone of your rebirth. That diamond, it was never about love. It was a symbol of betrayal, of manipulation, of two people playing with something sacred. But in the end, it became something priceless, the first stone in the foundation of my renaissance.